So, welcome everybody to another week of our conversation, our vulnerability, and opening ourselves up in a safe and shared space to explore who we are as individuals and who we are as a community and as one. So, I would like you to just let's all of us take in a breath together. Notice that expansion. And then as we exhale, and hold it on the exhale. Just see for a second or two if you can hold that exhale. Then when you're ready, you can take that inhale. But what I just want to point out is we take that inhale, we can hold it, and it feels very full, and it feels like a little stretching, pushing us outside of our comfort zone. And then we take that exhale, and there is immediately that desire to inhale again. Desire and expansion go together. Our desire to take in a breath, just notice if there's one that feels more comfortable holding than the other. When you inhale, you expand. Can you hold that expansion? Can you hold that breath in? And then just notice how long it takes for you to just want to let it go. And then when you've let it go, at the bottom of that exhale, you can hold it for just a moment. Notice the sensations that arise in the body. They oftentimes feel like fear, anxiety. And just know that you can take that breath in at any moment, that the air is right there waiting for you to receive it. A lot of us have difficulty receiving, taking in that breath, but that desire to take a breath is the very thing that makes us alive. So just noticing, inhale, exhale, and the magic is in the pause. When we've inhaled, we've stretched ourselves as far as we can. Just noticing comfort or discomfort in that stretching of who we are. And also noticing in the exhale, when we've let go of all that was in our lungs, can we sit there for a moment in that pause when the body says, breathe, breathe, breathe. Oftentimes that voice feels like an assault. That voice feels like it's telling us that we're doing it wrong, that we're not good enough. But it's just yelling at us to breathe in a way that it's felt safe. So that exhale, that contraction leads to an inhale. And you can't have one without the other. So when you are ready to come back, open your eyes when you are ready. And just notice how you're able to flow through that inhale, that exhale, and the pause in between. I am in the process of cleaning out a house, 24 years. Got stacks of books behind me here that I'm going to have friends come over and take a look at today and decide what they want to take with them. But I will just point out that I don't know if you can see some of the titles. some of the ones I have tucked away are ones that have been like my Bibles that have been with me for the entire time. Most of mine are around my body. And as we're talking this week about both the sixth gate as well as the sixth key, which are essentially one and the same. One is human design language, one is gene key language. And we're also talking about sexuality, creativity, and our bodies are our physical tools in which we interact with others, in which we create both energetically, sexually with each other. And the six is all about a shadow of conflict, a shadow of the battle of the sexes, rich versus poor, good versus evil. But really, it's all just an inhale and an exhale. There is no right or wrong. We can't have light without dark. We can't have dark without light. Both are needed. And when we are in these bodies and realizing that we are the creators of these bodies, sex takes on a whole new meaning. Co-creativity takes on a whole new meaning. The gift that comes from conflict is diplomacy. How do we treat ourselves? How are we in relationship with others? What kind of diplomacy do we have? And then the Siddhi that comes from it, and I'm speaking in gene keys right now, the Siddhi that comes from that gift, like the higher and the shadow and the light. The Siddhi is the light, the shadow is the darkness, and the gift comes from both of those coming together. The Siddhi of the gene key, the six, that conflict diplomacy leads to peace. How are we at peace with our bodies, with our relationships, how we interact, how we communicate, how we co-create? So on that note, we were chatting just before we get started. Kristie, are you ready to share what we were talking about beforehand?
Yeah, and I always love when you kind of define the gene key, right? Because even though I've heard you say Siddhi 700 times, I'm always like, Siddhi? C-I-T-Y? Like, yeah.
Yeah. S-I-D-D-H-I.
Yeah. And I love how when you can't use voice to text, so you have to spell it and it's each letter. It's so relevant, by the way. Like, how awesome is it that I shared prior to us, recording today, but like that I shared that, and I had no idea that that was the explanation of the six. I mean, you all know I'm just kind of like the caboose on this train when it comes to gene keys. I'm like, I'm on the train. I am just
but the caboose is
along.
needed.
I'm there.
The engine has its role. The cars in between have their role, and the caboose has its role. So there's nothing wrong with wherever you are on the train. We're just happy that you're on it.
On it, right? And that's such a relevant analogy to like what I'm talking about, like what I was sharing, because I'm like, I'll start over. I am participating in an infant wound class, and today the concept was idealizing, which I didn't even really know how big of a wound this was for me. But one of the things, like one of the embodiment practices, was to visualize our external self, something that we loved and something that we didn't love. And I was really quick to know what I didn't love, right? Lots of practice there. And through this embodiment, a lot of judgment came up of my own body. And then I started noticing me judging my loved ones, my kids, and their bodies. And I was just like overcome with shame and just overcome with emotion. And the leader asked if I wanted to share, and I couldn't. I literally couldn't bring any voice out of my mouth. And I allowed it to just flow, like just cried into a pillow on a Zoom, like, you know, full on vulnerability here. And I allowed it. And towards the end of class, I raised my hand to speak and really uncomfortably shared my judgment of my own body and my judgment of my children. And I said, I don't think I even have a question here. I think I just wanted to just witness it, just to share it and to allow it to be here. And she said, something that I want to hold for you is compassion, because I've shared other things in this group of my upbringing and stories that I have about my body and my own life, that I'm actively breaking generational trauma here, generational stories and beliefs about bodies. And I have judgment, and then I have the shame of the judgment. And what I really want to do is not have the judgment. But when I'm matching my judgment with shame, it's just like a negative battle. And so today I sat with my judgment with so much love and compassion, and just allowed all of the BS to just like all of the beliefs that I think my body should do and look like and be, and what I think my children should, all the shoulds. And I just held it with so much compassion, and I cried and I cried and I cried. And then I just feel like I'm floating. It's like I had shared, it's like a massage. Like I just feel kind of euphoric right now, because I've released so much of these stories in my head of what should happen. And the thing that is what I feel like the conclusion is that like this was one experience, and my logical brain thinks, okay, no, you're done with that. So you'll never have judgment again of your body. And so in my future self, I'm already anticipating having judgment again. And I'm already anticipating the shame of the judgment. So it's like for me to just keep remembering my job is to love, and to love me is to love them.
Inhale, exhale. You
Yeah.
can't have one without the other.
Right.
So when you actually get to that point of being like, you know what, more of this shame and judgment is going to come up, and that's okay, because now I understand how to move through it. You were talking, I'm going to share this a little bit, and I'm aware of like not wanting to overshare for you. But you were talking in Marco Polo. I was listening to that just before we got on, about movement and about, and I'll let you talk about how you were feeling about that. But I just want to note for anyone who's listening, like I've struggled with that too. I've been super thin. I've been super buff. I have been super chubby. And through all of those experiences, like I remember when I was in my early 20s, early 30s, and I was reading about like emotional and like why I've gained weight, and thinking that, oh, maybe I've gained weight as a protection mechanism from having considered myself the victim of sexual assault. And so I had all of these stories about, oh, well, that's why I'm fat. I'm fat because I've had all of these experiences. And so this is my body's way of sort of like protecting myself from an unwanted attraction. But then, having played with lots of different ways of looking at that, having been super buff, thin just by dieting, by restriction, by moving a lot, moving not enough. I'm like, what I realize I've been finding, I'm continuing to deal with all of these stories that I've had about why my body looks the way it does. When I shifted to, no, wait a minute. If I'm the creator of this body, this has been my playground. This has been my place to play and explore with what I want, what feels good to me. And when we were in Utah, um, when actually, Brenda and I were dancing downstairs one morning, and Beyonce Partition came up. Um, and the lyric, she's like, I just want to be the kind of girl you like. And I had this moment where I was like, screw that. I don't want to be the kind of girl somebody else likes. I want to be the kind of girl I like.
Mhm.
I want to want me. I want to enjoy moving sexually and not being like, oh, that's shameful.
Mhm.
What you're doing is wrong. Like, I want to feel that desirability. I want to desire me. So, yeah, I like the expansion and contraction, like knowing that we're just each time we're breaking through a layer, we're going to come back to shame, we're going to come back to judgment, we're going to come back to not feeling like we're good enough, pretty enough, rich enough, whatever enough,
Right.
or
Right.
that we're too much of something, we're too fat, we're too ugly, we're too stupid, whatever those voices are. um
Well, and I think so much of what was revealed to me today was the conditional love that, as society, as my family, and it's not to point fingers, right? Like, I really do believe that my parents were doing their absolute best. They were likely raised also under conditional love, right? But as we were listing all of our characteristics, pros, cons, right? Like everything, I didn't even want to accept like anything that I wrote down that was like a bad trait, or like anything that would be perceived as negative when we're, again, through the lens of judgment. I was like revolting it. I was like, no, I don't want to be that. I only want to be like this performance. And I was like, oh, well, of course you do. Because that's the shit that got you love, right? That was the stuff that got your gold star and your attaboys and your certificates. And like, my loudness was never complimented. My sarcasm, my smart ass attitude, like all of that was always like squashed. So of course I have been conditioned to like only want the best of me, and like to reject the like bad parts,
It
right?
reminds me of something that Abraham says. It's like, you say you want this designer handbag, but then you see somebody with someone with that very bag, and you're like, oh my gosh, do you know that she could feed a family of six for
Yes.
however long in the having of that? So it's like,
Oh yes.
we have these desires, and then we shame ourselves in the having of the desires, instead of allowing ourselves to receive that, because of so much conditioning
So much conditioning.
and judgment,
Yeah.
and the conflict between it's the battle of the sexes, right?
Hmm.
The male versus female, the insertion versus the receiving, um the giving and the taking, all of that.
And to that point, what I think is so beautiful, this was a major aha for me. When I hear that like battle of the sexes, I always think literally like male, female, man, woman. And then the idea of masculine, feminine. And I was like, oh, but that's both of us, right? Like, we are, no matter what your gender, you are a blend of masculine, feminine energy. And I think that's such an like a relevant space, because even though I am a female, I have masculinity, right? And those were often the parts that were squashed.
Yeah.
And so it's like I kind of learned to not like those like parts, the fire. But then ironically, that's what fuels me. That's what I advocate for so many people. I'm like, speak up, let's hear it. It's like, it's really ironic that the love is what's coming around. The parts of me that I hate are now going to be the parts of me that I love.
Yeah. That's why I talk about embracing both your inner little girl and your inner little boy, because
Yes.
both elements are there. Like if you were to think about your parents as children, and both of them are needed. Um, the fact is every single human being on this planet has that masculine and feminine. And sometimes
Mhm.
I think we get, I would previously I would have stated it as we get out of balance, we've talked about love and power. But now I like to look at it as we've chosen an area to study, an area to explore, like how we have masculized our feminine, our inner little girl. Some of us have masculized that. I think I'm making up new words. It's
I like
fun.
it.
And some of us, our little girls, have been like way too, our little boys have been feminized,
Mhm.
maybe. Like we have taken our power and we have like diluted it down. We've feminized it, feeling like we can't speak up, we can't be bold.
Yep.
And so I also want to give the opportunity for like you and I, Manny Jens, and both love. We're like we could sit here and carry it like, and we have an amazing projector and generator that need
Yeah.
a little space to hop
To
in.
tip their toe in and see if they want to jump in or not. Brenda's like, not today, Satan. It's okay. It's okay.
It's funny that you say that, Kristie, about the shame and the judgment, because this week it's been coming up for me around like body was never the thing for me, right? But money was. And when you said like, oh, all the judgment that I was feeling, it's like what came to me is like judgment for us, obviously, to be who we really are. And if it doesn't look like how our parents taught us how to look, right? That's where that comes from, right? So wanting to use my money in a way that is different, maybe that my parents have used their money, and feeling such shame and judgment. And then when you talk about, crying like, you didn't say crying like a baby, but I've been crying like a baby. Okay. Crying like a baby, like no words can come out. Like I just am crying. And like you say, it's just like this release. And I think sometimes we want to language it. We want to like, explain the reason why. It's just like, it just feels good to cry, because those are those parts of us that have been buried so deep that just need to cry. And then, like you say, and then it's just like, you feel so much lighter, and you're not that you'll never feel it again. Right. But like I was telling Tanya the other day, I was like, I feel like it's contractions, right? They're getting faster, right? But they're faster. And yes, it might be, I think as you continue to evolve and you go to the next level, whatever way we want to language or imagine that to be, it's like pulling out all the stops,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say the hardness, the contraction of the hardness, it's just like everything gets thrown at you, ego wise, mind wise. Our minds want to just, throw that at you. So I think like, no matter if it's our bodies or it's money or it's all the same, right? It's the parts of us that we have just shoved deep, deep down inside because it was not okay to be seen, to be heard, to be who we are.
And I think something that's really interesting, and this might be kind of relatable too, what I'm feeling today feels like I'm a unicorn. I'm like, it's such a beautiful honor and gift to be able to come here and share this, because I feel like you'll get it. And when I am going to tell my husband this story later, he's going to go, like, do we need to check you into a mental facility? Or, like something's wrong with me to find this part of me that's wounded and attempt to heal it.
Do you really think your husband would say that?
I don't know. I'm actually really curious. I was being dramatic. But he will kind of look at me with a side eye. and just be like,
I'm only joking and poking because like for years I had stories about the fact that my husband, I mean, he's known since he met me that I'm psychic, that I see things, that I hear things
Mhm.
and stuff. But for decades I was telling the story. He doesn't want to hear my crazy shit. He doesn't want to hear my woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
And yet I mentioned the other night about there's this thing, if you get a boat and you choose to rename it, there's this whole like tradition of how you're supposed to rename a boat. And we watched Atticus, Project Atticus, and they were renaming their boat. And I was like, oh yeah, so with our boat, if we rename it, I'll probably be like saging it and have like talking to the gods in all four directions and stuff. I said something about like he wouldn't want to be at the rename, that part of the renaming ceremony. And he goes, why do you think that? Why do you think I wouldn't want to be there?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, because I'm going to be pretty woo, you know, it'll probably be pretty out there. And I said something about the sage. He goes, no fire on the boat, right? And I'm like, right. And he goes, so why wouldn't you think I would be there? And I was like, just because it's so woo. And he's like, but I would be there to support you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I 100% hear that now. Like my judgment. Yeah, here's my judgment coming again strong. My judgment of Craig's response is always rejection. Like, right, he's going to be like, here we are again, Kristie. And almost, I mean, every time does he prove me wrong. And just like, he is just so present, and he's like, he might laugh and joke, but he never really rejects it.
No, he's always like, how can I support you?
Yeah. He's like, do you feel better? You know, there's always something very compassionate. But my statement, besides my joking about Craig, was how society has normalized so much, right? So like, Erin, your perspective is money and my perspective is body. It's like, I mean, look at our world of diet culture and exercise culture that is like conditioning people. So not only do we have like our own conditioning from our upbringing, but now we have like societal conditioning of like what we should look like and be like and do like and everything. And I'm like so grateful for these 4 little squares right now, because here I feel so safe to say and be and just show up, right? Like I don't have to perform. I don't have to be a certain size. It's just like super authentic. And I do have some people in my life that I can be that way with, right? But it's like, there's a lot of masks being practiced with other people and other situations. And I'm like, this is such a breath of fresh air to just like be present.
This is part of the process, right?
Yeah.
You have to first have awareness of where you've been tucking yourself and hiding yourself away from being seen, because it hasn't been safe.
Yeah.
Of course not. Of course, like your mind is giving you thoughts that are keeping you sequestered so that you can stay safe. But as you start to emerge, as you start to come out and find safety, that's why this has been so rich for all of us. Like our growth has catapulted what we've been able to do in community in a safe space has exponentially shifted the possibility. And pretty soon you're just like, this is me. You don't like it? Sorry.
Right.
Like, I never had that strength before. I never had that power. I never had the ability to just be like, here's all my freaky self.
Right. Right.
It's not your job to love me or hate me. It's mine.
Yes. And to know that nothing external is changing the insides. And I have tried as so many people have, right?
Every
Like,
diet, every
everything.
fitness, every like
Everything.
machine, go to the gym, every machine, every activity, different sexual positions, like ain't nothing changing.
Right.
If this and this don't like start being nice to each other.
Right. And even like jobs or relationships. I mean, granted, I had been married for a considerable amount of time, so that's been pretty consistent. But, you know, friendships would probably be the other fluctuation of relationships, and jobs and surgery, like physical surgery, and the dreaming of the other physical surgeries that hopefully we'll never encounter. But yeah, it's so fascinating. All of the efforts to change. And really the only thing to change was me loving me imperfectly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to get real graphic here, and real open. Because we are talking about sex, we are talking about the body, and we are talking about the external and the internal. So coming into my marriage, I had a lot of sexual trauma, a lot of body trauma. I learned not because of, however, I learned it, all the stories for me were that of, like my body didn't belong to me. I know I've shared that before. So coming in, I just wanted to please my husband. I just want to make sure that he was happy. And what was really freaking weird to me at the time was his pleasure was actually giving me pleasure. And I was like, well, shit. So there was a time when, oh, puppy. There was a time that we were on our anniversary, and we were at this very romantic getaway. And I remember he wanted to give me oral pleasure, and I was just looking at my belly. And I had done all kinds of fitness programs, and even though I had gotten into really great shape, my belly was just like, I was 196 pounds when I had our daughter. All those muscles and everything, like I could have done thousands upon thousands of sit-ups and it wouldn't have changed my belly. So here he is trying to give me pleasure, and I'm just looking at my belly going, no. So I had a tummy tuck, and I've got a flat ass belly now, which is great. Didn't fix a damn thing.
Right.
Like, yes, I can look in the mirror and go, I got a flat tummy, but it didn't fix anything.
Right.
I still felt the way I felt on the inside.
Yeah.
I didn't have a change until I started doing that internal work and realizing that like it's all on the inside.
Yeah. It makes me think, I was just thinking like how ironic that Brenda's camera flipped, because I was like, it's like, where do we focus our camera on, right? What are we focusing our lens on? Because when we're focusing on the imperfections and we like fix an imperfection, guess what else? It just finds another damn imperfection. You know, it's like, you just got to fix your lens.
Yep.
You know, but in theory, that's like, oh yeah, just fix your lens. And then in reality, you're like, what does that even mean? Right?
There's no money in fixing your lens.
Oh, amen, sister.
You know, like, I mean, yes,
I'm like, I get you, but I'm like, elaborate, please.
I mean, yes, with, you know, you can pay for coaching or you can pay for books and communities and things like that, which that's what we are, you know, we are wanting to help people fix internally, right? But the large majority of everything we're doing is, when we say we, right, the world is, I mean, if diets worked, we wouldn't have, I don't know how many there are, right? Like it's a billion. I don't even know what that, I mean, you ladies might have more of an idea, but like it's $1 trillion industry. I have no idea. Plastic surgery. I mean, I did have a breast reduction. And that was more so because I wanted to be able to wear bras and work out. And it wasn't from like, I don't feel good enough. Right. But plastic surgery and, you just, like you say, you will just find something else to fix.
Yeah.
And
it makes me think of the idea of like sick culture, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's like
medicine
not wellness.
in general isn't about wellness. It's about like
healthcare, we're coming for you.
oh man,
I
that's
shouldn't say we're coming
really,
for you, but like that's next on the topic.
I know that's a very sensitive subject matter, but yeah, it's kind of a parallel though.
Very much so.
You're right. There is no money to be made. Oh man.
Can you imagine if everyone felt good about themselves? You wouldn't have no more like Self magazine, or I don't know what are all of those.
Oh gosh, right?
Magazines, People magazines, and everybody, taking pictures of all of the celebrities. You wouldn't have all of the diets. You wouldn't have all of the, what else would you not have? You wouldn't have.
I'm like, would social media exist?
Yeah, I think so. It just might be from a place of like,
it's what we're
doing.
Positivity.
Fun and
It would
joy.
definitely, yeah, gosh, it's so interesting to think about a world without that.
Healthcare, pharmacy. Think about like, and Dr. Joe talks about this. Sorry, Tanya, I just want to say this real quick. But Dr. Joe talks about, like we're 70% of our day, typically, most people are in the survival way, right? So that means if that's even possible, 30% of our day, which probably isn't because you're sleeping some of that time, 30% of it is left for creativity. So can you imagine a world if everyone was really thriving? What could we create, all of us as a collective? What could we create and become as a world if we were all in this thriving and wanting to do things from a pure joy standpoint, not from, and your thinking is at a different level, like,
yeah,
all of it.
I feel like we are on that train though, right? It's like back to the ebb and flow, the contraction and the expansion. It's like we can't have that euphoric world, right? Like we have to have the contrast in order for the growth to exist.
Yeah.
But I just feel like our conversation right now, like what we represent, is an example of that expansion in this world, right? Like generations ago, this conversation wouldn't have been heard, right? And now we have space to not only have our own thoughts and ideas, but now like to collaborate and share and hopefully support others that also want to like have that expansion in their life. It's interesting. Go ahead, Brenda, take it.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that I find, and I've shared this with you guys before, the most valuable thing I get out of our community is not feeling so alone in what I feel. I'm not the only person on the world, even though sometimes it feels like, or it has felt like, I'm the only one that feels this way about this topic or about myself or about my feelings about myself. And I'm the only one. And just being willing to open in this space and say, this is what I'm feeling, and having you all respond of, well, I've done this, I've felt this, even the responses of, I see you, I hear you, I love you. That in and of itself is so emotionally important. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Is to acknowledge, like, and I'm going to go out there, Kristie, and well, I'm going to ask you not to judge what I'm saying. Okay.
Never.
Number one, I can't remember as a child what it was okay to be, except successful. And so I've had conditioning my whole life that my body wasn't delicate. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't good. And I've always looked to people who I felt were beautiful and going, I would love to be them because they don't have to feel like this. And then to hear you say earlier that you've got all these judgments on yourself, not that they're good, I'm just saying that you said you did. And I'm just like, then I'm not the only one. It's not greener on the other side. And that just, it helps so much. And that's one of the biggest things I love about us, is that it's, number one, it's okay to say and bare your soul. And there's not the judgment, there's not the criticism, there's only encouragement and uplifting and love. And that's huge, just so huge.
I'm sending you so much love. One of my favorite moments, Brenda, I hope that you can remember this, in Utah, and you're having a moment, and we just stood around you and put our hands on your shoulder, and we just like allowed you to be whatever emotion you needed to be. And it was such a beautiful, it reminded me of like the elephants, right? Like the herd of elephants to just like circle. And I just feel that, like, I just feel that that's what you all represent for me. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm like, I know that you're in a much, as I look out my window and see dead trees and freezing cold weather, and I know that you're in like this sanctuary of beauty. I'm like, I'm jealously hugging you virtually because I would love to hug you physically. In your space, not mine.
No, it's
But
wonderful. It's just wonderful.
But, you know, so if you don't mind, I want to kind of, in my experience, and this is, God, I cannot even believe I'm going to say these words. Okay. In my experience, because I have had so much physical like insecurities about my body, insecurities about my looks. And when I have shared those with people that I feel safe enough to share them with, it's often sent back to me, oh, you're so pretty, you're so skinny, you're so like that. It's like the idealizing, it's like the, I don't know the word. And then it was
it's like you're not
immediately,
entitled to feel the way you feel because you don't have a reason to.
Yes, I felt so much shame. I was like, oh, they think they would love short blonde hair, and I'm not grateful for my short blonde hair, right? So then it would just be this engulfing of what I was feeling. Like those feelings were not honored. They were always like, just not allowed, and not with any kind of ill intent, right? Like those people were likely just trying to do their best to fill my cup. But as you all also know, receiving love has been very difficult too. So any kind of attempts of filling my cup emptied out the bottom of the bucket because my bucket had a hole in it. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a snowball. And I feel like I'm starting to get to some roots of it. And knowing that every time I heal, Tanya, kind of back to what we were talking about, like healing the lens, like fixing the lens, like me healing my love, my genuine love for myself, whether it is flawed or not flawed, is my gift to myself.
And to the world.
And and then because it's like that, the cuppeth overflow, right? Like the more compassion that I give me, and that was another thing that I had kind of shared earlier too, when I was hearing about the judgment cycle and like matching it with compassion, I was able to witness how I often judge other people. And I can see that that is my judgment of myself. It's my own judgment that I'm seeing. It's not really genuinely judgment of them.
Well, judgment is self-judgment.
Always, right?
This is enough.
Go ahead, Erin.
No.
As I say, to take it to the experience Erin and I shared on the money side, because I've got issues there too, is we had a different, end result in the class, but we attended this class on money. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I felt like if we weren't struggling paycheck to paycheck or penny to penny, that we didn't have a right to feel like we had issues with money. If you have money, you can't have issues with money. And so just all this externalized pressure that we internalize, whether or not we should, or, you know, it's part of our makeup. It's just one of those things that, and Kristie, like you said, it's like what we feel gets minimalized or demeaned. It's not even nasty demeaning, but just it gets demeaned, like, oh, it's okay. You're not living penny to penny. You don't have a money issue. Yes, I do. It's very deep seated and it's generational and all that. And I'm working through it. Just like I have body issues I'm still working through and all those things. And it doesn't matter what the topic is anytime those things get minimalized, it squashes our spirit because it's not okay, or we feel like it's not okay to feel the way we feel about any topic. Sex too.
Amen.
Right? Because
Amen.
depending on your upbringing, sex can be a beautiful thing. Sex can be something to be embarrassed about. Sex can be something that only happens in the dark, behind closed doors, under the blankets, you know, all those things. And depending on where you are in your journey of healing, you're anywhere on the spectrum, and all of those things are okay because that's where you are. Sorry, Erin, go ahead.
I think you said it beautifully. And I think that, you know, Kristie, you already said, like, all judgment is self-judgment. It's like, it's nobody's place to say what someone, because ultimately we're talking about feelings. You don't know how I feel. I don't know how you feel. I cannot say that your childhood is better or worse than mine because I don't know how you feel and felt, you know? And I think what Brenda was talking about, like with looks and all of the things, it's like we want to, it's just judgment of what someone should or should not feel. And this isn't anything about sex, but just going back to like you, Kristie, talking about like when we heal ourselves. I had like the most beautiful text message with my mom yesterday, and we were talking about just her doing some work on herself and having love and compassion for my grandfather now and her sister. And I don't know how, but what we got on, and I just said, you know, if I wouldn't, like, we have to go first. We have to be, all of us, each of us go first, right? Like we can't sit here. And I was saying, I call my parents Nana and Papa because that's what my daughter calls them. And I said, I can't browbeat Nana and Papa into changing, but by me going first, by you, Kristie, healing, then that allows other people to see that, right? And I had told her, I said, you know, like it wouldn't have done any good to have had me tell you what you should be doing, right? That feels terrible. But by me doing what I wanted to do, it opened up possibilities and new ways of thinking, right? And so we think we're trying to be helpful by telling others how they should feel, how they shouldn't feel, or whatever, but like just us healing ourselves, and then it just happens organically. I don't know what other way to describe it, you know?
Well, and I think we did circle on this the other day because I can appreciate, I still have that desire to like convince, like, you should do this. Like this came out with my mom the other day. And I really feel like it's my own intolerance to my growth, right? It's my own intolerance to the pace of my growth. I'm like looking for that grass is greener on the other side, rather than just like really embracing that ebb and flow and thinking like, if I can't tolerate my own ebb and flow, why would I expect to tolerate other people's? Right? Like, again, it's like back to me, just
back to me. That's some shirt. Back
circle
to
around,
me.
back at it.
Right. So I just got to say, so I absolutely love human design because it shows us all the different connections. Like with human design, it's showing us that channel of 59-6. It's the side that is the conflict, the peace and diplomacy paired with that sexuality, the 59, that raw animal magnetism. It's why my husband can't do sex without some sort of emotion. Like, he was never someone to just have sex without emotion. Like, there's that coupling that we look at in the human design map. But then the other reason why I love Gene Keys, which takes 11 elements out of your human design chart and highlights them in your golden path, your Venus sequence, and your pearl, is this. Each of us has this path that we're walking. It's sort of the container in which we're working on this lifetime in. For me, my life's work has been not compromising myself. My evolution, that thing that's always my exhale there to meet me, is mediocrity. Like, just staying small, staying the same. And every time I walk that path, then it takes me over to my radiance. And my radiance is my devotion. It's my not being half-hearted about life. I'm fucking all in 100%. Like, I'm living. But there was a time where I wasn't there. Then that takes me down to my purpose. And in my purpose, I have that deep desire, that entrance into my Venus. Like, as we walk our path, we always have to take things back to our heart. We have to take them inside. And it's walking all of these judgments, all of this shame, all of these perceived stories that we have about who we are, how we are, what we are to the world. Every one of those has to come back to our hearts so that we can then emerge from that up into our pearl, up into the thing that makes us so valuable, because each one of us has an amazing gift to give to the world. And so, like, just exploring all of this, like, every time we take it back to the heart, you know, I'm always saying, bring it back to your heart, bring it back to you, bring it back to you. If you're observing something on the outside, bring it back to the inside. So, like, me, for sex, what I have seen change with my sexuality, my creativity, my ability to be half of a whole. Like, there's me, there's my husband, and then there's our relationship, right? This triangle, this basically two things that become more than one. They become three, actually. When I think about sexuality, creativity, what has shifted for me each time I've walked that path, taken it back to my heart, the value that comes out, the prosperity that comes out, I have seen me go from, like, I'm having sex with my husband because I want to make sure he doesn't leave me, because I want him to love me, because I don't want to be rejected, to I have sex with my husband to express my joy in life, to express my pleasure in life, to experience his as well. Like, I couldn't receive, back to the story about me looking at my belly. Well, he's trying to give me pleasure, and I'm
No
like,
way.
but
No
my
way.
belly, but my
Right?
belly, but my
Right?
belly, but my belly, but my. Did I mention my belly?
Right.
How are you not seeing this? How are you not seing this?
See, this is when I take my belly and make it talk, and he's like, enough already.
But now I'm like, oh yeah, baby, come on.
Mhm.
Like I love touching him, because when I touch him, I feel it in me now. I'm so connected to that. And that is a complete opposite of how I felt before. So and all of that has been, crazy as it might sound, of just like walking that path, bringing it always back to my heart, and then the value that emerges from that, the gift, the pearl that emerges as I watch a bird land on my
I
tree.
was about to say, did you just find a hummingbird?
It's not a hummingbird. Actually, what is that? I have to figure that out.
We have all kinds of nature today. The puppy joined.
nature imitates, well, actually, nature shows us everything we need to know about the pleasure and the pain, the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, the cycles, the seasons. Like it's all good. Everything's okay. Everything is as it should be. Things die, parts of us die, old stories about who we are die, go back into the earth. New seeds are planted, new flowers emerge, bloom, and then return to the earth. There is no wrongness. None of us can screw this up. We're never done. It's never over. It's just always this perpetual cycle.
Everything is as it should be. I'm like,
put it on a t-shirt.
Frame it. So good.
We have to get from at least for me, I had to get out of my victim state to, I don't know what you want to call it, to the state I am now, to believe that everything is as it should be.
Agree.
Right? Because when you're in your victim, it's all of this, like, why is this always happening to me? But now I see it as if I don't want to say get what I want, but if I don't get what I want when I am wanting it, now I see it, there's an absolute reason why it isn't happening the way I thought it was going to happen.
My husband asked me last night, he said, so we're doing this course for blue water cruising, and part of it had us discussing our fears and who we are and how, what is not our place, that's not the right word, but essentially like, how are we of service, and, what are we a part of? And one of the things that it asked about, like, what do you like doing or what do you hate? And I try not to use the language of hate, but one of the things I said was figuring out the how. I don't want to figure out the how. I want to just, because that dampens my ability to manifest everything that I want. And my husband said, is it a problem that you're married to somebody who does the how? Like, that is my exclusive thing, is the how. And I'm like, no, actually, that's the best part of it, because it's the give and the take of, you'll say how, and then I start scratching my head going, okay, who is it that lives that life, that does this thing? And then he'll say, and then how do we do that? Or, right. And it's this beautiful cycle. And it's very much representative of what's going on in my house right now. Like, the victim state is all the stuff is packed up in the house, and everything looks like the house is clean. Everything looks beautiful until you start opening the drawers and the cupboards and the closets. So this phase that we're being a part of with all of each other, as well as like the world at large, is we're pulling all the shit out of the drawers and the cupboards and the closets, and things get real messy for a while. And you're in that mess for a little while, right? Until you start going, you know what? I want to keep this. I want to hold on to this. And then you come back to it again and you revisit it and you're like, maybe I could let go of that. And then the next time you come back, you're like, gone, right? Like, this is the process of transformation. First, like, yeah, my house looks pretty, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when I go get into my cupboards or my drawers or my closets.
Yes.
There's no space to change anything. Everything's full.
And to honor that feeling, right? Like, that's kind of like me talking about my physical house here, my body, right? From an external position, it might look fine, look pretty, whatever the external, but it's like, if it doesn't feel good, what does it matter? Right? If I don't feel good in it, what does it matter? And I'm also really curious about, David's a generator, right?
He is.
I'm like, you might have just, I don't sarcastically say, like, you might have just saved my marriage. Anytime I come up with an idea, like, my Manny Jen will like ideas, right? Craig's like, how is that going to happen? Like, that's his first question every single time.
That's
every
me too.
single time. And I'm like, you are my dream squasher. But now I'm like seeing I always say he's like the yin to my yang. Like we just really work well together because when he catches on to an idea, he is like full execution.
Because he has the energy for it.
Yeah.
What'd you
But
say,
when
Erin?
he doesn't, it's like,
Remember when this is human design, but remember when you shared like is it from the ajna to the
head to the ajna?
Yeah, the head to the ajna, like 61, 63, 64, based on those channels, you are either who, how, and I've always been the how, which makes me wonder about David. Sometimes I feel like those two men are like my people. I mean, I know these women here are like my people, but like, I feel like we're separated at birth with those two because we share so many commonalities around money and around like proving and so many things, but the how is like a realistic, right? Like that's like the mind trying to solve the problem, which is what I've done all of my life, right? I could tell you how it's going to work because I worked it out of my head first, but that was very much of a coping mechanism because it didn't allow me to just focus on like what Tanya's thing is like who, right? Like when we're focused on the who, we get into vibration, and vibration is 5D. And that is not something that like from the logical mind, I've come a long way, but like 5D several years ago, I was like, oh, hell no, what are you talking about?
Right.
But in the logical mind, how makes a lot of sense because 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, I hope I did 4 equals 4, right? So that makes sense. But that is in like probability, that's not in possibility. And there is so many things that can come from when we are focused on who and vibration. Like we can't even fathom how it's going to work out when we're in that vibration. And at least it's been my experience, it works out way better than we ever envisioned it to work out when we are in the vibration of who versus the planning of the how. Because our pea little brains can't even think of all of the ways that, I mean, if you would be like, how did Tanya get involved with this boat? Or how did I get involved with the lady in haiku? Like, you would be like, where does that even come from? But it's just going back to, which of course, we name it who you, right? But like the logical mind. So I'm so curious if you have Craig's chart, if he is.
I was like, are you kidding me? Head and ajna both defined. I'm undefined in both. I have 64 and 63, and he has 61. Defined. That's what I'm trying to say, I think. Yeah.
David is completely undefined in his head. Interesting. Which means he's like, Brenda, correct me if I'm wrong, but that pretty much means that like there's no work left there for him to do.
Explain that a little further.
If you have no gates defined at all, whether or not it's colored in, but it's completely empty, that's considered open. And that's one of the things we had in one of my sessions was both the most likely to be open for someone is the head and the heart, because those have the fewest gates, right? It makes the most sense that those are open. But yes, he expressed the opinion that if somebody is open, there's just no work left to do in that area.
Did you say head ajna or ajna head?
Head. Ajna.
Head first, then ajna.
Okay. I'm like, this will be a whole nother conversation, but I'm completely undefined. And is that the word? Like, it's not colored in, none of my gates for ajna.
And your heart also.
And my heart. Yes.
Yeah. It's less common to have the ajna wide open because there's 6 gates, right? Just volume of gates. It's less, the more gates they are, the less common it is for it to be wide open. So the most common to be open is the head with 3 and then the heart with 4.
Interesting. We can maybe elaborate on what the heck any of those words mean.
Mhm. And then Jason's wide open in both his ajna and his emotions, his solar plexus.
He gets all his downloads from me.
There you go.
I'm his divine download. I kid.
Absolutely.
I kid.
That's good. That's good. I would love to hear his comment on that.
Oh, man, we got to get him. He's ready. I'm like, are you ready? Are you ready to? He's like, you got to like just start video recording me when I'm like just talking. I'm like, I don't always have my phone on me, but
I feel like he is going to be Kramer on Seinfeld. He's just going to like bust in with his wild hair, and he's going to be like, here's what I got to say here. And then he's going to like exit stage right.
David's going to be right there with him. Lately, I've just been like, damn it, but like, I need a camera right now because he just starts popping off with something, and he's
So
been,
good.
oh my gosh, yeah,
So good.
whole nother conversation.
And
Yes.
I just want to highlight that both of them rather abruptly, recently have retired. And like,
I wouldn't say abruptly for
not
mine.
abruptly. Yeah.
I gave him a divine download 5 years ago, and he told me I was nuts.
5 years later. Sorry. I might not have witnessed all of that making.
I say 5 years ago, but yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, but for sure. Yeah. Like maybe
This is
within the last
recent.
year.
A recent
No. Yeah.
retirees. And
Yeah. And he's like, I ain't never fucking working for anyone ever again.
right. But don't you feel, I feel like I'm hearing this maybe because like my parents' generation, like I'm witnessing more people retire, right? Like my friends' parents. And the number one question, what are you going to do? Right? Like, how are you going to enjoy your retirement? And like all these people are like, I don't know, like they're almost like scared. And I'd love to watch your husbands like come into a new element of their own post-retirement, because it's not about just like, being done. It's like new chapter.
Yeah. Such a, well, think about like society, right? It's not who you be. It's like, what do you do?
Right.
Totally. What are you doing?
Totally.
So, you have to get tested to go to Maui, and, but if you're vaccinated, you don't have to get tested. And so you can upload your card, but I'm not vaccinated. He is. So, I uploaded his card and I go, but if they change the rules or whatever, and you have to get, and I don't book a test for you, he was like, do you think I am going to have a problem just cracking coconuts for 5 days in quarantine? I was like, I don't think you will. No.
Yeah, no.
Fine.
If there's going to be one place to stay in quarantine, it would be Hawaii.
Hysterical.
I know. I'm like,
He's like, I'll survive.
If we end up getting what's possibly around the corner for us, I'm like, we might end up boat poor, but you know what? There are worse places to be stuck right now. So yeah.
It's all good.
So good.
Fun.
Ladies, we went long today.
Yep. Always good though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Until next time. Okay.
Until next time.
Bye.